Now, I'm really pleased to be joined on Not the Andrew Marr Show by Reverend Munther Isaac, who is a pastor of the Evangelical Lutheran Christmas Church in Bethlehem. Thank you, Munther, for Pastor Munther, for coming on. How are you doing?
Given the circumstances, we're doing okay. As I answered this question now, I'm alive. We're concerned about Gaza, but here in the West Bank, despite everything, we're doing well.
To our European friends, I never, ever want to hear you lecture us on human rights or international law again. And I mean this. We are not white, I guess. It does not apply to us according to your own logic. Silence is complicity. And empty calls for peace without a ceasefire and end to occupation, and the shallow words of empathy without direct action, all under the banner of complicity. If you fail to call this a genocide, it is on you. It is a sin and a darkness you willingly embrace.
You know, do you feel safe to speak yourself about what's happening?
I have been outspoken. I don't think this is a time to think of our own personal leisure or safety. And yes, I mean, if I am concerned of anything, I'm afraid of the settler violence or even the daily incursions right now that are becoming daily occurrences in the cities of the West Bank, including Bethlehem, where it's become irregular in the morning hours of the day to see Israeli military cars raiding homes, arresting people. As you know, more than 6,000 Palestinians have been arrested since October 7th. So the West Bank, it's not ideal at all, actually. The only reason we're not highlighting it is it feels nothing in comparison to a genocide in Gaza.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. It's kind of you're in a terrible situation. It was called. Someone said it was a slow genocide on the West Bank. Would you agree that that's the case, that there is a kind of war crimes going on the West Bank that you know we're not watching because we're looking at Reza?
Well, just 3 days ago, Israeli security forces assassinated 3 young Palestinians in a hospital. They disguised themselves as Palestinian civilians, even patients on wheelchairs, entered into a Palestinian hospital in Jenin and killed, assassinated 3 young Palestinians. It's all documented. I haven't seen the uproar of the world about Israel committed obvious war crimes, going into a hospital and killing patients. What is happening in the West Bank is unprecedented, but it's been going for years. I would say there is definitely a plan to forcibly displace Palestinians. Right now, they're not even trying to hide it. They talk about voluntary immigration in Gaza. They're trying to empty Gaza. And if they succeed, then we know very well we're next in the West Bank. All that, you know, just sheds light on the hypocrisy of the Western world. And to be honest, on their racism. You know, Israel alleges a few Palestinians who work for UNRWA were involved in October 7th, and then immediately the UK and other countries cut funding to UNRWA. Israel commits obvious war crimes that are evident and documented for everyone to see. We're waiting. I haven't heard any official, not just response, but I haven't seen the UK saying we're cutting all ties or stopping to support Israel. I mean, it's appalling, this double standards, which leaks racism to me.
This war has confirmed to us that the world does not see us as equal. Maybe it's the color of our skins. Maybe it is because we are on the wrong side of a political equation. Even our kingship in Christ did not shield us. So they say, if it takes killing 100 Palestinians to get a single Hamas militant, then so be it. We are not humans in their eyes. But in God's eyes, no one can tell us that.
The thing that I'm intrigued about with you is that you're obviously a man of religion, but you have made a point of saying this is not a religious war. Now, in this country, lots of people are being called anti-Semitic for supporting Palestine in some way. We've also had Israel talking up about religion and using the Bible a lot in how they're describing what they're doing, and some Muslim leaders are seeing this as a religious war because they've taken on that thing that Israel's doing. So how can you say it's not a religious war, and why do you think people want it to be a religious war?
It's not a religious war, for sure. The problem is colonialism. And Palestinians are not fighting Israelis because they are Jews. We're not, the Palestinian people, including Hamas, agree with it or you don't agree with it, okay? Hamas is not attacking Israelis because they are Jews. The Palestinians are not fighting Israelis because they are Jews and they are Muslims, and Jews or Muslims are fighting because they can get along. This problem has root causes. It began in 1948 with the creation of the State of Israel on the land of Palestinians, on the ruins of the towns and villages of Palestinians who were displaced. Back then, 800,000 Palestinians approximately, including the ancestors of the people in Gaza right now. So portraying it as a religious conflict gives the impression that Jews and Muslims are fighting because of religious differences, but that's not the case. And having said that, there are definitely now religious dimensions to this conflict. And on the Israeli side, we're witnessing a Zionist movement shift gradually to the right and to religious Zionism. And now religious Zionists are leading the movement at the State of Israel, when in the beginning it was secular Zionist, even though even the secular Zionists use religious languages. And most certainly Hamas uses the religious language, declares it as a holy war as well. To me, this is not the right use of religion. Religion should be used to bring peace, to fight for justice, to bring people together, but also to speak truth. So on the one hand, I want to emphasize that we're going through an occupation and an apartheid, and it's a moral obligation for any man of faith, any person of faith, to fight injustice, to resist injustice. I believe non-violently only. This is our conviction, at least as Palestinian Christian. It's a moral obligation to speak against the apartheid policies of Israel. But at the same time, we cannot turn this into a religious war as if religions are fighting. I think it serves a certain narrative to portray it as a religious conflict, because then it becomes not only that, it becomes the West's obligation to fight, terrorism, religious fundamentalism. And that's why we've seen Israeli leaders even saying, we're fighting a war on behalf of all, maybe the free world and civilized world, as if, the Judeo-Christian tradition are fighting together to fight radical Islam. And ironically, it's Netanyahu who's using now religious texts to incite genocide. I mean, the Netanyahu's use of the Bible is a clear reference to a story that calls for the genocide of the Amalekites and now the genocide of and the annihilation of Palestinians. So if the world is appalled about Hamas using religious language, why not do the same when Israel uses religious language? So I want to emphasize that, yes, I continue and I will continue to speak against injustice. It's a moral obligation. But I don't think this is and definitely I don't believe this is a religious conflict. And we should not make it a religious conflict. At the end of the day, we have to find ways to live together in this land. Christians, Muslims, and Jews, Palestinians and Israelis. And the solution cannot be one group excluding the other, annihilating the other, or expelling the other. And definitely not besieging and isolating the other, as what's happening right now in the West Bank, where we are isolated within communities. If you wish, concentrated camps. You have the Bethlehem block, the Hebron block, and what happened in Gaza for the last 16, 17 years is gradually becoming the fate of communities in the West Bank as well. This cannot bring peace. These are concrete policies on the ground, this is the root cause of the problem.
If you are not appalled by what is happening in Gaza, if you are not shaken to your core, there is something wrong with your humanity. And if we as Christians are not outraged by the genocide, by the weaponization of the Bible to justify it, there is something wrong with our Christian witness, and we are compromising the credibility of our gospel message.
With the conflation of this war as a religious war, do you think that has led people in the West to kind of turn their back on what's happening? Is that a factor in why you think maybe some of the Christian churches in the West have turned their back on this and stopped calling out injustice and genocide? I mean, it just as a little caveat on that, obviously, that as you've said, there were Christians in Palestine. There were churches, Christian churches in Palestine. That seems even more confusing to me. The fact there are Christians and churches in Palestine, why would Western Christians not be in support, do you think?
It's distressing to me to see the response of the Western Church, which varies from lukewarm calls for peace, as if we're not engaged and we don't want to get involved other than in praying for peace, and in some cases give charity, to explicit and direct complicity by supporting what Israel is doing. And we've seen church leaders actually emphasizing Israel's right to exercise self-defense, and that's why they say we cannot call for a ceasefire, which flips the narrative, making the Palestinians the oppressors and the Israelis the oppressed, the Palestinians as if we are the colonizers and Israelis the colonized, whereas it's the other way around. So the narrative of self-defense actually fits the Zionist narrative perfectly, which I think confirms what we've been saying for years now. It seems that the loyalty of the Western Christian world to Israel trumps even their loyalty to Middle Eastern Christians. And I cannot but see forms of racism in it. That's why I've been saying, I'm convinced now that the Western world do not look at us as equals, as equal human beings, giving the way they are responding to a genocide against our people, justifying it, rationalizing it, even not calling for a ceasefire until now. And let's be clear, I mean, anti-Semitism, which is a huge problem, which led to the genocide of 6 million Jewish people in Europe, was in Europe. And then it was redeemed on our expense as Palestinians. And I think part of the reason now why many Western countries and churches are hesitant to criticize Israel, and we've seen this, by the way, in most of the church statements, they condemn the Palestinian side, they never condemn Israel. And I wonder, what would it take for you to condemn? I mean, 10,000 children have been killed. What would it take for you to condemn Israel? But I think a lot of this hesitancy stems from the fact that many of these churches, maybe they're still dealing with the guilt, but they're dealing with it on our expense. And so the solution to racism against the Jewish people, the solution to anti-Semitism became support to Zionism. It wasn't like dealing even with the thing within the inside. It became just support to Zionism. Maybe we could argue that this racism was shifted towards the Palestinians, against the Palestinian now, as our rights are continually denied, as we continue to be disinherited even from our own land, our existence, or so that the Western world can make amends to the horrific events of the Holocaust. And all of a sudden, we, the indigenous people of the land, are portrayed as the problem. Jews are simply returning to their land. They promoted this narrative, churches, making a Jewish person in the UK as if he's more entitled and have more rights to come and live in our land, more than the indigenous Palestinians who took care of this land, farmed it, inherited it, lived in it for generations and generations, if not, thousands, hundreds of years and more. So you see how it's a package, and sadly, right now, with all the complexities I mentioned, it's the innocent civilians and young children who are paying the price. And that's why I continue to speak out, and we continue to challenge the church for its complicity, for its silence, and for its contribution to where we are over the years. I mean, we're partially here because of the support of the Western Church to Israel. This is, no one can deny this. And speaking to a British audience, the British mandate, which created and gave birth and helped, the Zionist immigration to the land, a lot of it was motivated by religious sentiment of Jews returning to their land and then being restored, believing in Christ and all of that, preparing for the second coming of Christ. This has all contributed to where we are right now.
I mean, the thing that I find most puzzling is, in fact, it's not puzzling, but we're seeing the geopolitical order unmasked by what's happening, how they are complicit. We're seeing that through the ICJ. But the idea of faith and religion being unmasked as complicit is another aspect that hasn't really been talked about. We are all children of God, are we not? And you've just said that Palestinians are seen as lower class. They're not in the same class as other people. That is surely against all Christian religion, whatever church, surely. I mean, everyone is equal under God. That's a central part of it, isn't it?
Yeah, and the problem is church leaders might say, yes, unequivocally, all people are equal, but, and then they go on justifying the killing of 10,000 children and not even calling for a ceasefire now. I mean, actions speak louder than words, positions speak louder than words. And I think one of the things that was unmasked in this war, to be honest, is the hypocrisy of the Western world. That's why I said in my sermon, and I continue to say now, I never want to hear a European person talk to me about human rights again. Because, it's empty words to us. It doesn't apply to us. We know this. When it's our rights that being denied, electricity, water, food getting into Gaza, you're not speaking out. So how dare you continue to lecture us on human rights, the same way they lecture us on racism and inclusivism when, there's so much racism and definitely anti-Semitism in Europe. But yes, you're right that I think all people of faith should say and stand firmly with justice and equality. And clearly, right now, there is historical injustice in Palestine. And let me give you an obvious example where we still see churches very hesitant. In the last 2 years, several well-respected human rights organizations came with very concrete and detailed reports detailing the apartheid actions of the State of Israel. This includes Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch. This includes several Israeli human rights organizations, including B'Tselem, Yesh Din, and others. And of course, Palestinian human rights organizations have been saying this and documenting it and proving it. It's not just a claim because we like to shame Israel. I mean, apartheid has a definition, and the definition applies to Israelis' policies. Now, what do you think churches said, let alone the European world and the European countries? Do you think, oh, yeah, these are serious reports, let's study them, let's see? No, they did not still do this. And when we challenged them for that, they said, well, it's not helpful, it's counterproductive, you're not building bridges, and so on. And again, when I speak to church leaders, I challenge them, if you're not willing to take these reports seriously, then you should call for Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch to close, because they're irrelevant and they're wrong. You obviously know better. So you see that while the Western world continues to brag and boast that we fight for freedom and equal rights and human rights, when it touches their own interest, because Israel is important to the interest, the political and economical interest of this country, or the interest of the church, everyone is silent, and we turn a blind eye to these reports. And then we have this war in Gaza. So you get my point, why we're very, very frustrated right now from the reaction of the Western world and the Western church. And the Gaza is just what's happening right now in Gaza is the climax of policies that we've seen over the years.
Just finally, I know we're going a bit over time. I couldn't help thinking about another pastor, Pastor Niemöller in Germany, who made the famous quote about first they came for the communists and we did, and it wasn't me, so I didn't do anything. Is that something? And he lists all the people that the Nazis came for, and then they came for me, and there was no one to defend me. Is that a similar situation? You think that they're coming for the Palestinians and they're not? People aren't saying anything. If this sort of colonialism continues, then the people will find that they're being attacked as well. It's not just going to be Palestine where this finishes, is it?
Here is what I know, and here's what I've been saying, is that if the world was silent about the displacement of 2 million people in Gaza, then they will definitely be silenced if settlers attack us in Bethlehem and the same happens to us in Bethlehem or in Ramallah or in Hebron. And that's why I've been saying and repeating, silence is complicity. And one of the things about the ICJ is that if the world, if the ICJ does not succeed in stopping a genocide in Gaza, then my fear is that this will give license for other genocides to happen in other contexts. This is why it's serious. We need to be, either we apply the law, either everyone is held accountable, or we don't need this law. We don't need these things. And I think when I said Gaza is the moral compass of the world, I truly believe this, because Gaza right now is the test. Gaza is where I know where people stand, to be honest. If you're still not calling for a ceasefire after seeing all these tragedies that are happening, and it's not like we have to uncover what's happening in Gaza. The people of Gaza are broadcasting their own genocide. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to see these images day after day. Children from under the rubble, people running with thousands to one truck of food. I mean, what will this truck of food, how many people will it be able to feed? And then people fighting over pieces of bread. It's heartbreaking. And then the rain right now, and the killing, and the fact that there are the hospitals, the whole system has collapsed, operations without anesthesia, and we're still deliberating, we're still talking, we're still considering, we're still negotiating. Seriously, there's something wrong with our humanity, with our moral and ethical standards. And that's why I think if you're not appalled and making a stand about what's happening in Gaza, something wrong with your values.
We will be okay. Despite the immense blow we have endured, we, the Palestinians, will recover. We will rise. We will stand up again from the midst of destruction, as we have always done as Palestinians. Although this is by far maybe the biggest blow we have received in a long time, but we will be okay. But for those who are complicit, I feel sorry for you. Will you ever recover from this?